this just blew me away when I heard it. It was in August of 2020, and it like haunts me because as we get closer and closer to fall of 2024, I want you to remember this, what she was willing to do, what she thought Joe Biden should do in the event that the election was close at all. In other words, Donald Trump can't do this, but Joe Biden sure can. He can hang on for dear life no matter what. Listen.
You know, Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances because I think this is going to drag out, and eventually I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch and if we are as focused and relentless as the other side is.
Okay, so I was stunned when I heard that. It sounded very Banana Republic-esque. This was August of 2020. She went on her friend's podcast, a woman who used to be on her PR team or something there, and she said this, and you see the PR lady jumping for joy. Oh boy, this will be exciting, right? We can have Florida and hanging chads all over again. It's okay if it's one side. It's not okay if it's the other side. Alan Dershowitz has pointed this out quite often, including on this show, and he's absolutely right. In other words, it's their way or the highway. And he's like, wait a second, I'm the one who was actually helping Gore with those hanging chads way back when. But I think that perhaps they came out of that lesson learned. Perhaps Hillary Clinton came out of her experience up against Donald Trump. Lesson learned, right? Maybe she thinks, I shouldn't have conceded. And so here's my advice for Joe. Don't concede. Don't concede. You hang on. You hold on no matter what. And then, hey, if it doesn't go your way, you can always pull up a Jimmy Carter, right? To say this kind of thing. Remember when Jimmy Carter said this? I mean, this is atrocious, absolutely atrocious. He said this to John Meacham, an MSNBC reporter, commentator, whatever, historian. And I was appalled. I was absolutely appalled. And then this became rhetoric. In fact, I had to hear Hillary Clinton, so did you, start to say this over and over and over again. It was just because the Russians put him there. He was not a legitimate president. Please give me a break. Let's cue Jimmy.
There's no doubt that the Russians did interfere in the election. And I think the interference, although not yet quantified, if fully investigated, would show that Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election. And he was put into office because the Russians interfered on his behalf.
So do you believe President Trump is an illegitimate president?
Based on what I just said, which I can't retract.
Ooh, funny. Anyway, that took on a whole life of its own. And the next thing you know, everybody's saying he's not a legitimate president. He was only put there by the Russians. The Russians stole the election. That became their calling card after Trump won. And then they made it very clear that they were not going to allow him to win, or they were going to fight it tooth and nail if it were close in 2020. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, it is so critical that he win, and he win big in 2024. Otherwise, we're going to be dealing with this again, I fear. And in different ways. And it's why, you know what, they got to get the ground game going. It's why I'm glad to see what Lara's doing over at the RNC. I'm glad to see Americans for Prosperity doing all they're doing. This is why it's good that there's a Georgia oversight panel there in Fulton County, Georgia, where all kinds of things go on, right? I mean, you get the Fannie Willis, Nathan Wade thing. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. I'd like to know how much there was any kind of conspiracy in terms of the effort to coordinate all of these cases. Why did they take this long? Why are they happening now instead of back when they should have? I mean, there's a lot of questions here, and this is frightening. It's actually really, really frightening. This didn't used to happen in the old days. This is all new territory, but they brought it on. Hillary Clinton's campaign is the one that went out and hired Perkins Coie, the law firm that then went and paid Fusion GPS Research, a bunch of former Wall Street Journal investigative reporters. They were the ones that had been contracted originally, incidentally, by members of the GOP to dig up dirt on Donald Trump. It then got sold off to the highest bidder, being in the Democrat Party, being Hillary Clinton's team. And this was just a bunch of, if you read it, and I did, immediately, my reaction was, wait, is this like a piece for the Inquirer? It is not like any kind of intel document that you would actually read. And anybody do that. And yet they went with this. They went with this because they were trying to take him down, and they were trying to prove that somehow the Russians had him on speed dial, even though the Russians didn't. one thing after another. Pretty startling, disgusting stuff. And now here we are, living through it again. And now they're going after him with all they got. And they got nothing. Absolutely nothing. Which is where we are today. As Michael Cohen goes to the stand, and the big headline, this cracks me up, the big headline, how he reacted about Melania potentially responding to Stormy Daniels. That's what they're talking about. And apparently he wasn't as concerned as he was about some political stuff. Well, maybe that's what he told Cohen. Right? But we actually also heard from Hope Hicks earlier in the week saying he was very concerned about what his wife thought. This is junk. I mean, it's just junk. And it's actually appalling that I have to sit here and even talk to you about it. I mean, this is pathetic stuff. We got real problems, America. We got inflation. We got a border issue. We got the threat of World War III on our doorstep. And yet this administration is so talentless, they can't handle any of that. And this is where we find ourselves talking about Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen today. Lovely.